Welcome to MRE Uncut, where we'll give you real and practical insights into the real estate scene in Melbourne. We'll discuss what's happening in the industry, all backed by MRE's history of over 30 years in the game. With that said, let's jump into this week's episode of MRE Uncut.
Welcome back to another MRE podcast. My name's Stephen Fitzsimon. Today I've got two guests with me. I have Sophie Carmichael, who is one of our buyer and client managers at MRE.
Hello.
And I've also got our sales manager, Michael Fava.
How you going, Steve?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for coming in, guys. Today we wanted to have a quick chat about a lot of activity that we're seeing in the market, which was from first-time buyers and, you know, sort of seeing that. Like, Sophie, what type of percentage would you see in terms of your role at MRE being first-time buyers?
Just given the stock that we do predominantly sell, especially being apartments, majority of our buyers are first home buyers. I'd say if you to put it into a percentage, I'd say maybe around that 70%.
Okay, 70%. And from that, like in your role, do you want to just give the listeners a bit of a background as to what your role consists of?
My role is essentially just helping buyers find the right home for themselves. So I help them from start to finish. I don't do any vendor work, just specifically with buyers. So whether I meet them at an open for inspection, whether they buy that one, if they don't, hopefully cross-sell them to another one and find them another home that might suit them a bit better.
Yeah, perfect. So, and week by week, how many of these first-time buyers or clients are you meeting at inspections?
It definitely varies. I would say I probably meet about 20 to 30 new buyers a week.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're getting 1,000 new buyers a year, so 1,500 odd new buyers a year coming through your inspections that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. If you, want to assist those people, what do you tell them as the first sort of place to go to? If they've walked in and they might live in the building and they're just sort of sticky beaking and they're looking to buy and they go, what should I do now? What's my first step? What do you tell them?
I think it's definitely very important to have a chat to the bank or your mortgage broker and just see whether you are in a position to buy yourself and sort of what that could look like for yourself. A lot of buyers come in thinking maybe they can spend up to $700, but when they get their pre-approval back, they might be looking around that $500 to $550 mark, which obviously drastically changes what their search is actually going to look like.
Yeah, nice. Is that the same for you, Michael, in terms of your first stepping stone? Is it finance?
Very much the same. Also, if you're at that ready point where you believe you might be there, I think what I've noticed is really critical for a lot of the prospective buyers that we're dealing with, and more specifically first-time buyers, is to really gain a clear understanding to the location that you love prior to potentially jumping into the property market and starting that initial search too. And the reason is what I've found it, a lot of buyers get overwhelmed by the quantity and supply that's there, and it can be quite confusing. And as you can imagine, if you're looking in an area such as South Yarra, but then you're also interested across 5 or 6 different suburbs, you could literally have hundreds per suburb of the exact same characteristic property type available. So it creates almost too much supply to shift through, and it can get quite confusing. Exactly right. So I'd recommend really narrowing down the suburb that you believe meets your needs best, and then further looking into what properties are available within that suburb and what that looks like too.
Do you recommend using like the map filter that they've got on the web portals where you search by a map, or am I going too far into it?
I think that it definitely assists, and the more you can narrow it down, the easier the search gets in terms of you're realistically not overwhelming yourself by continuously looking through different properties in a location that might not end up meeting your needs.
Right.
So I think that if you do end up attending an inspection for a property and you love the location, but maybe the property is not best suited for yourself, that's when utilising a function tool like that map can really assist to see what's out there.
That's surprising. So the buyers that are out there, due to the density of some of the places where we live and the volume of apartments that are predominantly in there, they're not actually able to identify the zone that they want to live in. They could be suburbs off.
Definitely.
And that just means that the pool is too deep to be able to identify the property that suits them.
Yeah, I don't know about yourself, Soph, but for me, on certain inspections on a Saturday, and a common question that we're communicating with the prospective buyers, how many inspections do you have planned to try and get through today? And it wouldn't be uncommon for people to state, look, between 15 to 20, but it's sort of across 6, 7 suburbs. And realistically,
Wow.
in many
Yeah,
cases,
100%.
that's more difficult than the agents conducting the inspections, because at least we have a schedule that meets the requirements to us getting to that next
they could be
inspection.
zigzagging across
Exactly
town.
right, zigzagging, and then you've got 3 or 4 inspections at the same time. So then it's just working out what one maybe potentially best suits what we're looking for. And that's where looping it back to a position like a buyer and client manager, where you've got someone that's dedicated to assisting in almost filtering through and shifting through properties and recommending or giving those final few options to what might be suitable, can really assist with that initial due diligence process.
Yeah,
in
so
terms
it's
of buying.
almost like a part buyer's advocacy
Definitely
type
so.
role,
Yeah.
where you're
Spot on.
working to help them. Okay, so you mentioned the big one being that Sophie, in terms of the buyers and getting their finance right. You quoted 2 figures, that 550 and 700. They're pretty drastic changes in terms of, like, that to me in our sort of market sounds the difference between a 1+ study and a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom property. How often are you sort of seeing that difference? And do you think that that's because people are perceiving the availability of credit in the old style, like their parents might have told them that you can borrow? Is that where it's coming from, or what's your
potentially.
thoughts?
I think a lot of our buyers are so young, and they have no idea sort of what the property search really looks like and what they're, I guess, getting into.
Yeah.
So they kind of just give themselves a sort of figure and what they would ideally like to buy, when it's not necessarily what they realistically can afford.
Yeah.
It just goes to very much an educational knowledge
Yeah.
standpoint, and where a lot of prospective buyers that we're dealing with, more so the first home buyers that maybe haven't had too many conversations
Yeah.
surrounding what that actual process looks like.
Gotcha.
That they're ideally or believing to say, this is what I currently have in terms of a savings standpoint. I'm assuming, or I've just typed in some figures into some sort of calculator system that,
Right.
upon Google, and it clearly isn't as accurate, or maybe doesn't shift as quickly in what knowledge you can obtain clearly from a mortgage broker or the bank.
So people in this first-time buyer status, they're avoiding having the face-to-face conversations with their mortgage brokers or banks because that's a challenge. That's something out of their comfort zone. So then they're sort of guessing their way through, but they actually could be wasting a lot more time looking at properties that aren't suitable for what they can afford because they haven't taken that basic first step of going and talking to the bank or the mortgage broker.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's those somewhat confronting conversations for some of these prospective buyers. And I suppose it's the exact same reasoning to why, if there's an auction campaign, for example, being conducted as opposed to a private sale,
Yeah.
the property might be so suitable to the first home buyer, but they will not attend that auction on the basis of the potential conflict or the way that it's conducted, where they do essentially feel uncomfortable with wanting to progress or putting themselves in a position, even though that property is suitable, but going down a method like that. And I think it can be similar, and which is why hence the buyer and client manager tool or position is so useful in assisting, especially first home buyers, and navigating them through the market.
But let's face it, it's scary. Like,
Definitely.
It can be. It's not for everyone.
No.
So we can definitely understand to why certain campaigns might not be suitable on the basis of, yet again, taking out a large portion to what you believe the perfect buyer would be for that property.
Yeah, so if you're a vendor, you're assessing who the buyer's going to be,
Spot on.
and then choosing the style of sale to match the behaviour of that
Yep,
buyer.
exactly.
And then, Sophie, I imagine your whole day is then filled with education of these buyers. What are the other fears that you sort of hear from them about pressing go on an offer? What are they scared of?
A lot of, even at the moment, I just closed a deal over the weekend with Michael, actually, and the buyer, she was just really unsure of, I guess, what the process looked like after signing the contract. So she thought that she had to get her loan approved first before she could even sign the contract, and that was putting her off putting an offer in and actually getting that contract signed. So they just don't often understand how the process actually works, and it is I guess, a daunting process, but when you break it down step by step and you utilize people like myself, it definitely takes a bit of the fear and the uncertainty away.
Yeah, okay. So it's a lack of, they've never done it before,
Yeah.
therefore they don't know the basics
Exactly.
of,
Yeah.
of it. And you don't get taught in school.
Exactly right.
Exactly.
And then potentially just don't have certain people within an inner circle that they can have these conversations with.
Yeah,
in many
maybe their
cases
parents
too.
don't own properties, or
Exactly
maybe they
right.
bought
Yep.
properties 45 years
Exactly.
ago and they haven't done anything since.
It varies dramatically. It varies dramatically, and it's not uncommon in terms
Yeah.
of circumstances like that to take place. So
I know if
they're
I asked my mum, she would have no idea.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so if you've got nobody to go to, you're sort of relying on that information.
Yeah.
And Dr. Google can't always answer every.
100%.
well, it's even what to plug into Google to get the answer that you're
Yeah.
looking for. So
Yeah.
it's even at that point. So it's there is a lot of hand holding through a lot of processes, and I think that it's almost the point for certain types of properties in which you know that you almost have to deal with every prospective buyer as if they have no understanding of the process.
Exactly.
Right.
And then after having clearly a conversation or qualifying with where they're at in their journey, you can then pivot to where required in terms of those next steps with that particular buyer. But the benefit is that, yet again, we're showing through a property that might not be suitable for that potential client, or even if they don't end up buying a property from our team, we've assisted in that process with at least getting an understanding to what it actually looks like to be able to purchase a property and where we can assist in their journey. So I think from that aspect, the position has just been so pivotal, with providing some really, really good knowledge to first-time buyers within the market as well.
Yeah, great. So let's look at the product that they're actually buying now. Like, if you've got a first-time buyer and they're walking in, what dazzles them as such, or that could be like a gadget, as opposed to characteristics of the properties that you're selling that you know will deliver value to them in return over many years whilst they're living there? Are there things that you sort of see people go in and go, oh wow, this is really cool, and you're sort of cringing when they're saying that because they're overlooking something that really should be perceived as more important?
Yeah, I think from what we see, a lot of the time, the reality is if we're dealing with a lot of prospective buyers that are first-time buyers, and ideally just say looking for a property $600,000 or under, for example, where they do obtain or have incentives to be able to purchase that property.
You get the stamp duty
Exactly
reduction,
right.
first-time buyers, yeah.
With where it sits, because there are so many duplicates of the same type of property, regardless of what suburb you go in, where we've clearly seen a window of the past 10 to 12 years of substantial growth of quantity of high density
New
apartments
with
exactly
swimming
right.
pools and gyms
Then
and all this type of stuff.
anything as minor as slightly risen ceilings or floor to ceiling windows, or both bedrooms, for example, if it's a 2-bedroom property, both having windows,
Yeah.
these little factors or features within the property essentially create it crazily enough to be a point of difference to what's commonly out there.
Okay.
Even in terms of design or floor plan configurations, if you've got a kitchenette as opposed to an island bench within the property,
Yep.
these little features are what tends to gravitate first-home buyers, or where they do get a appeal to that property, because yet again, crazily enough, it does stand out in terms of that newer type stock that's available out there at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. So would you say that somebody would prioritize the layout of a kitchen over location, or is location still the winner?
I think it really depends buyer by buyer.
Okay.
Location is definitely such a big thing for a lot of buyers, but then some people couldn't care less, well, not care less about where they're living, but their home is their home, especially if they've come from more of a house environment. So they really want to make sure that that internal space is there and it's functional enough for them.
And
Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
probably impacted
Exactly,
that
yeah.
too, where previously the location was probably a really or the biggest factor in terms of that purchasing journey.
Yeah.
But once you were locked in your home for a certain period of time, I
Thanks,
think
Dan.
people really, exactly right. I think people really understood the importance of truly feeling, safe, secure, and comfortable within your own home. So people or prospective buyers are probably looking more detailed into properties than what they ever have. And in addition to that, there is more tools out there available for prospective buyers is that what there ever were at any other point of time. So being able to utilize features on, a domain report or realestate.com, there's a lot of different avenues that prospective buyers can utilize. So I think all of that comes into place as well.
So let's imagine your best mate was going to start the journey on buying a property, right?
Yep.
You've told us the first thing they've got to do is go out and see their bank and find out actually how much they can borrow, whether or not they're ready to go. Michael's added in there, okay, pick your location so that if you're looking for an apartment in a dense area, you're not spending years and years trying to find the right one. You can isolate that, and then once you've got the area, once you know how much you can borrow, what's your next steps for your good mate who's looking to buy this? How are you going to help them out there?
I think definitely do your homework, have a look online, just utilizing realestate.com and domain and everything just to see sort of what's out there in terms of location, size, and just, I guess, what style of apartments are out there as well. I also think something that's really important to keep in mind is just realizing that you're not going to find your perfect home. It's probably not going to be your forever home either, especially if you're just buying an apartment to begin with, and just sort of realizing what your must-haves and your non-negotiables are and sort of things that you can, I guess, live without. So whether it's I must have, a bedroom a window in all bedrooms, but I can give away the island bench for this one. So it's just being a bit more realistic, because at the end of the day, you're probably not going to find. So should they start
a list? Would you be sitting there and saying to your best mate, do you need bedrooms in both windows in both your bedrooms?
Yeah, just be a bit more realistic with yourself. If you're looking in the apartment space, you're not going to find what you're going to find in a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
Just sort of realizing what you do want, what you can't live without, and just being a bit more realistic there.
Perfect. Okay, so you've got realistic, you've got location, you're sitting there, you know how much your money you've got to go. You're ready. You found a property you like.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael, the time is there. I want to make an offer. What do I do?
Yeah, it's something that we get asked quite frequently as well. I think after that point where you've found a property that you believe meets your needs, I think it's always important, or it can be useful, to get a second opinion from a family friend or someone that's within the space to be able to assist and run their eyes over things too.
Okay.
There's a few different features or factors to a property I think that's worth reviewing, such as orientation, outlook, the type of car space that it may have in terms of future development around the area, and looking into all these factors. When you get to the point,
so
yes,
go for it. Orientation. Why do you say orientation?
In terms of when the sun rises, where it doesn't, in terms of when you do get that direct natural sun coming in, do you get direct natural sun coming in terms of light?
So people aren't looking, a lot of these new buyers, they don't know which way it faces, therefore they might be buying a property that's darker or hotter or colder than they want.
And then you're looking at it further, does it have double glazed windows? If it is west facing and you're going to get that hot afternoon sun within Melbourne,
never
is it single glazed? Exactly right. Is it going to protect the other double glazed windows going to be there to be able to assist with the temperature within the apartment too? So there's a lot of these different factors that's worth looking into, and then at that point of time in which you're ready to make an offer, you'd hope that you do have a property professional or the agent that you are dealing with, or a buyer and client manager, to be able to basically, yet again, handhold in that process to be able to obtain what that offer looks like. And by that, starting at the fundamentals, price point that you have a level of interest or you see value within the property, a settlement period to what makes sense for yourself and what the bank may advise.
So let's dumb this down. You found the property, right? You found it. You reckon it's worth $500,000.
Yes.
Okay. You email Sophie or you call Sophie and you say, "Hi, Sophie, I really like it. Can I offer $500,000 for it?" What, Sophie? What are you going to say to me at that point?
Absolutely,
right.
Love to assist.
Yeah.
In order to put an offer forward to any vendor, we do need to have it in writing. So it can be text or email, whatever it is.
Yep.
Sometimes we send out a little savvy form that you can just fill in. It's a one-page PDF, grab all of your info. An offer to a vendor just consists of your initial offer price,
Yes.
your preferred settlement period, your deposit, usually 5 or 10%,
Yep.
and then any other conditions, whether it's subject to finance, which a lot of our contracts often are, subject to building and pest, whatever it may be.
Okay.
And then we can pick up the phone to the vendor straight away and start negotiating for you.
So can you do the subject to building and pest if it's an auction?
If it's pre-auction, you can request it and without doubt. But in terms of that auction process, of course, an unconditional offer in terms of that auction date itself.
Yeah. So I knew that, just by the way. The question is that I'm trying to say is that, there's lots of different things that they need to be considerate of. It's not something
Without doubt.
they should think that they need to be an expert.
Yeah.
And like, if I try and round this up, there's too much to learn without without working in the industry.
Yeah.
So you rely on people that have done it before, rely on people like agents for asking questions. Remember that the agents are working for the vendors, so they're going to be, thinking in that way. But in terms of the approach, ask a million questions.
I think you have to. And even if you're looking at a fundamental of an offer being a settlement period, for example, if a prospective buyer really wanted to settle within a 30-day period because it meets what they're looking for, but the property's tenanted at the time, for example, well, that's where the agent's got to assist with guiding and educating with what that process actually looks like from a tenancy standpoint with legislation for when settlement can actually accurately take place in the quickest possible time for the buyer. So there's a lot of different moving parts, and exactly what you stated before, there is a lot to learn. So there is a lot of guidance that's essentially needed to assist with getting to that end goal of a contract of sale being signed, being compliant, and best meeting the needs of both the seller and the buyer. And that's where we can definitely assist. And yet again, we hope that a lot of experts in the field can do so.
Wow. So first-time buyers, ask a million questions, be curious, act innocently.
Yeah, no question is silly. And that's making them feel comfortable to understand there is nothing that you can ask that one would probably surprise us because we've heard quite a lot. So it's important to note that. But essentially, it's just really important to make our first-time buyers feel comfortable with feeling as though they've got the ability to ask what they want.
Perfect. Sophie, Michael, thanks for coming in today.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.